The market stirred with life as the first rays of the sun painted the earth in gold and amber. Smoke from roasted maize mingled with the scent of fresh spices, and the colors of woven fabrics danced in the morning breeze. Children weaved between stalls, their laughter ringing like distant drums, while vendors shouted their wares, calling out in voices both loud and melodic. The city hummed with energy, a living mosaic of sound, color, and motion. Yet beyond this bustle, the narrow, dusty backstreets told a different story: cracked walls, weary faces, and the quiet struggle of survival. In the midst of this contrast, the market held its secrets, places where fortunes could change and where pride and shame collided. It was here, among the vibrant chaos, that destinies were quietly waiting to be rewritten. At a small worn stall tucked between a fabric vendor and a spice merchant, Mama Adana carefully arranged her vegetables and handmade crafts. Her hands moved with the precision of one who had known hardship and learned patience. Despite the tattered cloth draped around her, there was an undeniable dignity in the tilt of her head, the gentle nods she gave to passing elders, and the calm grace with which she welcomed each customer. Her eyes, bright and unwavering, told a story of endurance and unbroken spirit. The market buzzed around her, yet she seemed untouched by its chaos, a quiet presence holding moral and emotional weight for all who observed. She was the heart of the tale, a symbol of resilience in a world too often blind to the suffering of the humble. Chaik pushed through the crowd, his polished shoes making a sharp contrast against the dusty ground. Ambitious and impatient, he walked with the pride of a man who had fought to rise above his beginnings. But when his eyes fell upon the familiar figure of his mother, hunched at the stall, a flicker of shame and anger crossed his face. He clenched his jaw, fighting the instinct to turn away. Around him, neighbors whispered, eyes darting between mother and son, sensing the tension. In Chaik's mind, duty wrestled with desire. He wanted to acknowledge her, yet feared the judgment of friends and passers-by. The market, full of life and judgment alike, held its breath as the son confronted the reflection of his past. With a sudden movement, Chaik stepped forward and shoved Mama Adana aside. "Move. You're in my way," he snapped, his voice cutting through the morning chatter. The crowd gasped, hands covering mouths, while elders shook their heads at the disrespect. The mother he had once cared for now looked at him with quiet sorrow, her body swaying slightly from the force of his push. There was no anger in her eyes, only a deep, unspoken strength. Unbeknownst to Chaik, the woman he dismissed as a beggar had inherited a fortune that could turn the city upside down. And yet, here he stood, blinded by shame, ambition, and pride, unaware that the world was about to remind him that true wealth lay not in money alone, but in patience, dignity, and moral courage. The market had witnessed many things, but the betrayal of a son against a mother would echo long in its memory. The market buzzed with hushed murmurs. Some vendors shook their heads in disbelief, others whispered sharply to neighbors, and a few quietly shook their fists at the injustice they had just witnessed. Children peered from behind baskets of yams and maize, wide-eyed, sensing the tension but not fully understanding the weight of shame in a son's betrayal. The elders exchanged knowing glances, their wrinkles deepened by years of seeing pride turn to folly, and their quiet nods spoke volumes, a silent reminder that moral balance was being observed. "Such disrespect! A son should honor his mother," murmured an old vendor, eyes dark with sorrow. "May the spirits guide him back to the path of humility," replied another, her voice low but firm, as if speaking both to the heavens and the marketplace itself. Whispers of judgment circled through the market like wind stirring dust, a subtle chorus reminding all who watched that society sees and remembers. Every gesture, every glance, became a mirror reflecting both shame and the expectations of the community. Beneath her humble cloth, Mama Adana's chest rose and fell with quiet dignity. She straightened a row of tomatoes, her hands steady, her eyes calm yet aware. She bore no anger, only patience, but a secret glimmer in her eyes hinted at fortunes hidden from the world's view, a wealth beyond measure, inherited from a distant relative, now poised silently at her fingertips. Her tattered clothes disguised power and influence, a reminder that dignity and strength often reside beneath the simplest coverings. The villagers felt it, though they could not name it. There was a subtle shift, like the wind before a storm. Mama Adana's steps became deliberate, graceful. Her eyes shone with a quiet knowledge, nodding gently to vendors who had once whispered insults. Even the children sensed it, their laughter softening, replaced by awe at the silent command she now held over the space. The air carried a new tension, an unspoken promise that change was coming, and that those who had judged too quickly might soon see justice in action. As the morning sun climbed higher, casting golden light across the market, the story of this woman, once humiliated, now quietly formidable, began to etch itself into every eye and every heart. The lessons were already forming. Humility may hide untold riches, pride brings judgment, and the fate of one's actions often unfolds in ways unseen. The marketplace was no longer just a place of trade. It had become a stage for destiny, morality, and the quiet power of resilience. Chike's laughter rang sharp across the market, slicing through the morning chatter. "Look at you, mother! Still selling these wilted vegetables as if the world has forgotten your place," he jeered, turning to friends who snickered behind him. Neighbors exchanged uneasy glances, and vendors paused mid-call, their baskets and trays forgotten for a moment. "You should be ashamed, mother," Chike continued, his voice dripping with pride and disdain. "Do you see what I've become? And yet here you sit, clinging to this pitiful stall, pretending nothing has changed." An elder shook his head slowly. "Pride blinds the young, but the spirits watch, and they never forget." Mama Adana's lips pressed into a thin line. She said nothing, only bowed slightly, arranging a basket of tomatoes with care, her movements deliberate and calm. Her heart ached, yet her composure remained unbroken. She knew that wrath spoken in haste would not mend a soul that had strayed from humility. Slowly, she stepped back, letting Chike's shameful words hang in the air, and retreated toward the quiet edge of the market. The next days passed with subtle changes. Mama Adana moved quietly through the town, acquiring small shops, hiring vendors, and helping struggling families. She left no proclamation of her actions, but her presence began to shape the market. Shopkeepers noticed an unexpected respect in her dealings. Young apprentices whispered of her fairness and wisdom. Slowly, the market, once dominated by gossip and petty disputes, felt the influence of her quiet authority. At night, she would sit by the dim glow of her oil lamp, recalling the betrayals of her past, the husband who had stolen her family's land, the village elders who had turned blind eyes, the long nights she spent laboring to feed and raise Chike. She remembered the sacrifices made in silence, the tears shed alone, and the prayers whispered to the ancestors for guidance and strength. Yet every memory only reinforced her resolve. Her power was not to be flaunted, her victories not to be shouted. The wisdom of patience and endurance, lessons taught by ancestors and life alike, would guide her. And though Chike remained unaware, the seeds of justice had already been sown, ready to bloom in the fullness of time. Chike sat in the sleek office that he had built with borrowed money and borrowed trust, yet the walls seemed to close in on him. Deals he had promised with confidence crumbled, friends he thought loyal betrayed him, and whispers of his failures reached even the ears of those who once envied him. "How did it all go so wrong?" he muttered, running his hands through his hair, the weight of shame pressing against his chest. Around town, people shook their heads quietly. "Pride makes the young blind," an elder said, watching Chike pass by in a luxury car that now seemed like a fragile shell. "They forget respect, and the spirits remind them in due time." Meanwhile, in the quiet corners of the market, aid began to appear mysteriously. Children received school supplies, struggling vendors found new tools in stock, and old women discovered sacks of maize at their doorsteps. "Who is this helper?" murmured a curious vendor, eyes wide with wonder. No one sees him, yet his deeds ripple through the market like water flowing unseen. Chike walked through the market one afternoon, unaware that he benefited from these gifts. A new shipment of produce for his business arrived, financed by a discreet donation from an anonymous benefactor. "I don't know how this came to be, but at least something is working," he muttered, pride returning slightly, blind to the source of his luck. The irony was thick. The very mother he had shunned and humiliated was shaping the world around him while he remained ignorant, chasing hollow victories. Mama Adana moved quietly among the market stalls, her head held high, gestures calm and deliberate. Every act of kindness, every small investment, was a silent declaration of her power and moral authority. She did not boast, she did not call attention. Her patience and resilience formed the bedrock of justice yet to come, a lesson in the quiet strength of the righteous. Vendors watched her with new respect, children pointed with awe, and even the elders nodded knowingly. The seeds of redemption were sown, waiting for the day when the arrogant son would finally see the full measure of his mother's wisdom and the true cost of his pride. The market festival burst to life as the sun reached its peak, casting golden light across rows of vibrant stalls. Brightly colored fabrics flapped in the wind, and the air thrummed with the rhythm of drums. Children danced with painted faces, women sang in melodic voices, and elders nodded in time to the ancient beats that had guided the community for generations. The smell of roasted maize, spiced stew, and fresh fruit mingled with laughter and song. This was no ordinary day. It was a gathering where pride, humility, and destiny were quietly measured in every glance, every action, and every whispered word. Among the revelry, the stage was set for truths long hidden to be revealed, and for the threads of fate to tighten around those who had forgotten respect and virtue. Chike moved through the festival, his chest swelling with pride. Spotting a struggling vendor, a young man barely able to keep his small cart upright, he sneered. "What a pathetic sight!" he shouted. "Even the festival cannot hide your uselessness." Laughter erupted from his friends, and the vendor shrank back, cheeks burning, hands trembling over the meager fruits in his basket. Mothers clutched their children, and elders shook their heads, muttering about pride and cruelty. "He knows not the spirit of humility," an old woman whispered to her neighbor. Chike's arrogance gleamed like a knife in the sun, cutting through the innocence and hope that surrounded the marketplace, his shame and ambition blinding him to the moral eyes watching every word. The crowd hushed as a new presence entered. Mama Adana moved gracefully through the festival, dressed in elegant fabrics that shimmered like the morning sun on water. Her assistants flanked her with quiet reverence, carrying baskets and parcels as if she were royalty. Villagers craned their necks, whispers spreading like wildfire. Her calm gaze swept over the market, dignified and unshaken, and yet there was power in her every gesture. The simple mother of days past now moved with authority and influence, a silent command evident in the tilt of her head, the careful placement of her steps, and the quiet assurance radiating from her eyes. Even the children paused mid-dance, sensing that this was no ordinary woman entering their festival. Chike froze, the laughter on his lips dying as he turned to see her. "Mother!" His voice faltered, confusion warring with disbelief. The murmurs around him grew louder, voices blending into a single hum of shock and admiration. Elders exchanged knowing glances, and vendors whispered about the mysterious fortune that seemed to surround her. The crowd's gaze pinned Chike in place, reflecting a moral reckoning he had not yet fully understood. A strange unease settled over him, his pride beginning to crumble as he sensed, though could not yet see, that the balance of power and honor had shifted. The festival, once his stage for dominance, now became a mirror of fate, and he realized, with a growing dread, that the humble mother he had scorned had risen beyond his understanding. Mama Adana moved through the festival with quiet purpose. She handed a young girl a scholarship envelope, her fingers brushing the child's with a gentle warmth. "Learn well, little one," she said softly, "for knowledge is the seed that grows even in barren soil." At another stall, she provided funds for a struggling vendor to restock fruit and grains. The man bowed deeply, tears glinting in his eyes. "May the spirits bless you, mother," he whispered, his voice choked with gratitude. All around, her actions were subtle yet profound, no loud proclamations, no boastful gestures. The community watched as generosity flowed like a hidden river, invisible yet shaping everything it touched. In contrast, Chike's earlier cruelty, his mockery of the weak and humble, seemed small and bitter, dwarfed by the quiet magnitude of his mother's benevolence. Every gift she bestowed carried a lesson. True power is not in pride or force, but in wisdom, patience, and compassion. Chike's laughter faltered as he observed the scene. His eyes widened in disbelief as he saw the faces of those he had scorned now lit with relief and hope. "Mother, it's you," he stammered, voice trembling. His heart pounded, guilt and shock mingling as the festival's music became distant background noise. Around him, villagers exchanged glances, some nodding knowingly, others whispering quietly, their judgment heavy yet fair. Chike felt the weight of his arrogance pressing down, and for the first time, he understood that the woman he had belittled now held both the wealth and moral authority he had always sought. The son who had once stood tall in pride now bowed under the silent power of his mother's virtue. Mama Adana approached him slowly, her expression calm and serene. "Chike," she said, her voice steady and clear, "wealth and status are fleeting, but respect and humility endure. Pride that crushes others leaves only emptiness. I forgive you, not because you deserve it, but because mercy restores balance." Her words struck him like a drumbeat in the quiet market, reverberating through his chest. She did not shout, she did not scold. Yet the moral weight of her presence was undeniable. The villagers witnessed a reversal of roles, the mother rising with dignity, the son humbled by his own folly, and the community felt the restoration of order that African tales hold dear, justice tempered by compassion. Chike sank to a nearby crate, hands covering his face as shame coursed through him. The irony of fate was inescapable. The very humility he had scorned, the patience he had mocked, had transformed into power, influence, and respect. Mama Adana's quiet rise stood in stark contrast to his reckless pursuit of pride and immediate gain. The villagers murmured among themselves, reflecting on karma, destiny, and the natural balance that life enforces. Wealth, they realized, was not for the arrogant. Virtue and patience endure beyond fleeting triumphs. In the eyes of all, the market had become more than a festival. It was a stage where morality, justice, and the lessons of African storytelling played out in full, vivid color. Chike sat on a low wooden bench at the edge of the market, his hands trembling as he traced the worn edges of his shirt. The festival had ended, yet the images of his mother's quiet power and the villagers' admiration haunted him. His chest ached with the weight of shame, every memory of ridicule, arrogance, and harsh words pressing upon him. "What have I done?" he whispered to himself, voice barely audible. He saw the faces of those he had mocked, the vendor, the children, the neighbors, and felt the sting of guilt. In the African tales his grandmother had once told him, shame was never just punishment, it was the path to awakening. Now, Chike understood. The community's silent judgment reflected the truth he could no longer deny. Respect and virtue mattered far more than pride or wealth. Mama Adana approached, her steps measured and calm, a gentle smile on her face. "Chike," she said softly, "the past is not erased, but it does not define the future. I offer you a chance to walk the path of humility and compassion. Come, work with me. Learn to honor family, to serve the community, and to restore what arrogance has damaged." Her voice carried authority and warmth, the moral weight of a life lived with patience and wisdom. Chike looked up, eyes glistening with unshed tears, and nodded slowly. In that moment, forgiveness became a bridge, and redemption a path illuminated by his mother's mercy. Days turned into weeks, and Chike's transformation began quietly but surely. He helped restock vendors' stalls, assisted children with their studies, and offered genuine apologies to those he had wronged. Small acts, a hand lifted, a basket carried, a kind word spoken, revealed a new understanding growing within him. The villagers began to notice the change. Where pride once ruled, humility now guided him. Mama Adana watched with quiet satisfaction, her patience bearing fruit, for in African tradition, true change comes not from force but from moral guidance and lived example. At last, the market, once a stage of shame and humiliation, became a celebration of virtue. The villagers gathered, singing and drumming, honoring Mama Adana for her wisdom, resilience, and generosity. Children danced around her, and elders nodded in approval, recognizing that true wealth lay not in gold or silver, but in character, kindness, and the courage to do what is right. Chike stood beside his mother, humbled yet hopeful, a son reborn through understanding, respect, and love. The community's cheers echoed through the streets, carrying the timeless lesson. In the world of men and spirits alike, morality, patience, and virtue endure, shaping lives and guiding hearts across generations. Chike moved through the market with careful steps, carrying baskets of grains and fruits to the vendors he had once mocked. "Please, allow me to help," he said to an older man arranging cassava. The vendor hesitated, suspicion shadowing his eyes, but Chike persisted, lifting crates and straightening wares with steady hands. Children he had once ignored now ran past him, giggling, and he offered them small gifts of pencils and notebooks, earning cautious smiles. Every action he took was deliberate, a demonstration that his remorse was real. "Words are not enough," he murmured to himself, recalling his mother's teaching. "Deeds speak louder than pride." The community began to notice. Whispers of approval and nods of recognition spread quietly through the crowd, signaling that redemption, in African tradition, must be earned through labor, humility, and service. Mama Adana observed from her new shop, a gentle smile gracing her face. She guided Chike patiently, showing him the nuances of fair trade, the importance of listening to the elders, and the value of supporting the less fortunate. "Leadership," she told him softly, "is not in commanding wealth, but in lifting others with dignity and patience." Her presence commanded respect without force. Her actions taught more than any words could. Vendors and villagers alike watched as she combined wisdom with modern prosperity, blending the old ways with new opportunities. Her patience, kindness, and moral fortitude became the invisible backbone of the market, proving that true influence is earned through virtue, not gold. As the sun began to set, painting the sky in hues of amber and crimson, Mama Adana stood atop a small rise overlooking the bustling market. Children danced near the stalls, merchants smiled at fair trade, and Chaik worked diligently among them, his heart light with new-found understanding. The golden light bathed the market, symbolizing triumph born of patience, moral courage, and compassion. Harmony had returned, mother and son reconciled, the community thriving, and justice quietly upheld. In that moment, the African sunset seemed to bless the market itself, a reminder that perseverance, dignity, and ethical strength endure beyond fleeting misfortune. Villagers gathered around Mama Adana, voices soft with reverence. "She has taught us more than wealth ever could," one elder murmured. Another nodded, "Patience, respect, and courage shape our legacy, not riches alone." Chaik stood beside his mother, humbled and grateful, understanding that community respect and moral courage were the truest forms of success. The market thrummed with life and shared purpose, echoing the timeless lessons of African tales: personal transformation, the enduring power of dignity, and the societal validation earned by living rightly. Here, in the heart of the community, virtue and justice had triumphed, leaving a legacy that would be remembered for generations.